Hi all, today's session is a mop-up session for those who couldn't access um, the staff development day that we had in April. So the quality team are just kind of using this as a bit of a mop-up week, and today's session is all going to be about building an understanding of effective teaching and learning assessment and support for learners with additional needs. This is kind of going to be a little bit of a condensed session on what was covered that day, but there are some activities that you can complete, at in your own time, and have a little think about your learners that you have with additional needs and how we can support them best and make sure that they are having effective teaching and learning. So the aims and objectives for the session today are to identify where information on additional needs is given and where support and documentation can be found. So this was something that was picked up when we spoke to staff, that it wasn't very clear where this information was. So hopefully by the end you will know where exactly you can find out information about your students. Another one is to recognise the fundamentals of creating accessible classroom resources, and I'm going to introduce you to a little tool that you can use which makes it a little bit easier for you to do this, and you're going to have a look at a document and see whether you think it is accessible. Another one is to consider best practice for deploying LSPs in lessons, so developing inclusive classrooms and writing learner profiles. So have you got a learning support person in with a particular group, and are you using them effectively? And we're going to have a little look at how we can do that. Another is to assess potential barriers to learning for our students, and we are then going to have a little look at the Ofsted framework, which is the 3 I's, which I'm sure a couple of you already know, to our learners and our future lessons. So we are going to start off by introducing what is an additional need. So I'll just put these out there. So a learner has any additional needs if they have a significantly greater difficulty in learning than the majority of other learners of the same age, whether they have a disability which prevents or hinders them from making use of facilities for education of the kind generally provided for others of the same age in schools or colleges. And we are going to have a little look at kind of our cohort at the moment, seeing how many of our students do have learning difficulties, might have a disability, and I'm going to introduce you to some resources that you could use to find out about the different additional needs that our students have. So this slide is all about our cohort that we've got, and I've just highlighted there the LECs in the red box. So we have 150 students with a learning difficulty and 98 with a disability, and these are obviously numbers based on those who've declared it or who've been for testing. So it could be higher, than that. So currently in the college, over 900 of our learners have a learning difficulty, and approximately 700 have a disability. So we thought that this would be a good slide to put in there to show kind of why this is relevant to us. It's a large amount of students that we need to support, and we need to make sure that we're doing that in the best way that we can. So a lot of them are enrolled in our mainstream provisions across college, and the college also has a discrete pathways provision for learners, which comes in obviously with our health and social care school, for those with more complex special educational needs and disabilities, and that's around 30 students into this provision. But a lot of the rest of the students are in mainstream. So what I would like you to do now, if you can just consider the following. How do I know if I have a learner with additional needs, and how do I find out more information about their specific needs, and how do I support them? So if you could maybe pause the recording, have a little think about what you use, who do you maybe speak to about additional needs, and I'm just going to quickly come back and show you where you can find that on the system. But if you want to pause it and have a little think, and then I will move on to where you can access your learner support needs. Okay, so where to access your learner support needs. Students with additional needs are flagged on registers. So just next to where that sentence is there, you can see a student number, and we've got the little badge, the blue badge. This is something when we've spoke to the team that they're working on, because they do recognise that it's not really clear what the specific needs of the individual are. but it's a good way to kind of, when you've looked at your register, it can flag it up, and then you can then go on to the additional learning tab, which I'm going to show you now, to find out a little bit of information about them. But that is a work in progress. They are looking to change that. So obviously on the Learners Pro Monitor profile, you're going to click on the support along the top, and then if you go into the additional learning support tabs, you can find out the outcome of referrals, different recommendations of things that you can do in the classroom, and it kind of gives you things that they recommend doing, what they wouldn't do, and that can be really informative and useful as well. So that is where you will find it, and we've put that in because that is what some staff said, they struggle to find that. So we just thought we would point you in the right direction. Okay, just quickly now as well, this is only for HE teachers, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there is a disabled student allowance. So for anyone delivering HE, it's essential obviously that you're aware of this. And if a HE student has declared a disability, health condition or learning difficulty, they must apply for this themselves via the student finance. So there are kinds of funds there that they can use. So if you need that, if you want to message me on Teams, and I can send you the link where there's more information and your students can have a little look at it. I know we are coming to the end now of the HE courses, but that would be good and beneficial for next year as well. Okay, so our support, so we're going to have a little look at kind of what we could do, and there is a really helpful resource I think that you can access, and again I can send these links out as well, and you can access them through the PowerPoint. So there's so many different needs and support requirements to be aware of, and our learning support team have developed a really useful handbook for guidance so that we can be informed about different needs that our students have, but also so that we can be confident when we're supporting them. And that is actually available on the Pedagogy Insight SharePoint, and they are going to come round to all the different staff rooms with printed copies, so we can kind of use it as a guide and have it on hand there. So if you go for the Pedagogy and Insights tile on OneDrive, and then if you click into Pedagogy and Learning Support, you'll find the ALS handbook in there, and as I said, it's really useful, all different kinds of information and kind of what we can do in our classrooms to implement effective support as well. Okay, so we're now going to have a little look at creating accessible documents. And again, this is like a place where you could pause the recording, have a little think about, what do you do that makes your documents accessible? Okay, so what do you maybe think about when you're creating Word documents or your PowerPoint? Because that's what we're going to have a little look at in this section of the PowerPoint. So again, if you want to pause and have a little think about that before you move on. Okay, so tips for printed handouts. So this is kind of when you're using handouts in the classroom, or it could be, online if students are also kind of typing up answers, that kind of thing. And it gets you thinking about kind of what designs you use and how we use it. So when you are creating your handouts, these are suggestions that we've been given that will make them more accessible for all our students. So obviously writing in plain language and avoiding any jargon and abbreviations that the students might not understand, and it makes it harder for them to process and engage with it. Give the document a meaningful title and use headings to help the reader navigate the materials. If you use fonts like Arial, and make sure that they are a decent enough size as well. I think like when we're marking work and it comes in really small, it's really difficult. So being really aware of your font and the size in which you are creating your handouts in. Use sentence case, so avoid all caps, text and italics if you can, and make sure that the text is left aligned and not justified, and make sure that there's clear colour contrasts and that we do not overlay text over images. So again, just making it easy and accessible for all our students. So tips for PowerPoint presentations. We're using these all the time, so this is quite useful as well. So include alternative text with all visuals, so some students really kind of struggle with that. So if we've got the alternative you know, it's good for them to process. Make sure slide context can be read in the order that you intend. When you're creating a new slide, use built-in slide designs. Add meaningful hyperlink text. Ensure that colour is not the only means of conveying information. Use sufficient contrast for text and background colours. Give every slide a unique title, and use a simple table structure and specify column header information. Again, your font size, being aware, you know, and of the font that you're actually using, and make videos accessible to visually impaired and hearing impaired users. And YouTube, you know, YouTube links in particular, kind of making that very easy for us now, because you can find those on there with like your subheadings and stuff like that. So there's just a little activity now, and again I will pause so that you can pause and have a little look at it. You should also, on the site where you're accessing this, be able to see a handout. It's about the Beatles, so I want you to have a little look at that and see if you can list all the accessibility issues, so kind of what is really wrong with this document, and how would students who are reading from it, with additional needs, how would they struggle to use that. So I'm just going to pause before I give you a couple of answers. Okay, so hopefully you've been able to have a little look at it. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through some of the things that, you know, make it really difficult for students to access that document about the Beatles that you've had a little look at. So the colour contrast is low, font size is inconsistent and too small, and we've already talked about why that's really difficult for some students to work with. Headings aren't used, built-in styles, images aren't in line, you know, images don't have kind of tags that might tell students what they're showing. Tables aren't used, so you know it's really difficult, and the alignment is off as the text is inconsistent. You know, there's text there that are all in capital letters, like in the instruments section. Built-in bullet point lists aren't used, that's in the members section. You know, URLs aren't used in the website section, so you can't actually, you know, quickly click on that link and access them. And a screenshot of text is used as well, which could be really difficult for some students to access. Okay, so this slide is a tool basically that we can use. And I've got to be honest, I didn't know this existed either, so it's made life a little bit easier. So on Word documents and on PowerPoint, there is actually a check accessibility tool, which you will be able to, you know, find on the top of your document. So before sending any kind of, you know, Word documents, it could be in spreadsheets, PowerPoint, you can actually run the accessibility checker and make sure that Microsoft Office context is easy for those, you know, with kind of additional needs and disabilities to read, and so that they can edit as well. And it will do all the things there bullet pointed, so it'll, you know, check that they have, you know, titles that are accessible for people, checks colour contrast between the text and the background. So that is a quick and easy tool that you can use to check that your resources are accessible for all in your classroom. So again, here are a couple of resources that you could use, and they are all on the SharePoint, but again, when I send this PowerPoint round, you'll be able to click into them, and again, we've made them accessible so that you can find them quite easy. But I would suggest having a little look at some of them, because there's some really good guidance and kind of strategies of what we could do. You know, there's guides on how to use the accessibility checker if you can't find that. You know, and like the dyslexia friendly style guide. So there's a lot of information there that could be really useful for yourselves and for your students. Okay, so another little thinking point, reflection point, because we're now going to have a little look at when we have a learning support person in our lesson with us as a tutor. And I want you to think about how, you know, do you use these effectively? Are you using them to maximise your learners' progress? So if you could kind of pause again, have a little think about what you do in order to do that, and then we're going to have a little look at things that we should consider. Okay, so this slide is all about working with your LSP. So you hopefully you've got consistent learning support and people working with your students, and you've got them through every lesson and you get to know them. But there's key considerations that you maybe want to have a little think about, so that we can maximise this and make sure that it is impacting our students in a positive way. So we've come up with a couple of questions that you could consider. This could be, how do you share the intent of your teaching with your LSP? So, this is really important to make sure that it's before the lesson, a couple of days before, making sure that they've got time to ask any questions if they need it, kind of understanding, they know what their job role is in there, they know what you're intending to do. Do they receive a copy of your lesson plan or your learners' targets? So I know LSPs who I've worked with have actually printed off the sessions, with the plans, and they bring them with them, and they find it a little bit easier to follow because they've got them there. The third question is, when are they received? And that links in what I've just said. Are we giving them enough time? Do they have an opportunity to discuss activities with you before and after they've taken place? So before, do they know their roles? Do they know why we're doing things? And after, they could give you feedback on how well they think, that particular student engage with that, does it work for them, that kind of thing. Other key considerations are, do they know their purpose in the session? Do they know the rationale for the activities taking place? Are they recording progress in your sessions? And what information do they receive on learners to enable them to focus their support? So, do they know why they're working with that particular student, and are they supporting them the best way possible? Okay, so we're now going to have a little look at developing an inclusive classroom, and these are things that we can do. And when Staff Development Day was face-to-face, we wanted you to kind of go around the building and have a little look. So that could be something that you do now, about your classrooms that you're in. Have they got these key things that we need when we are trying to develop an inclusive classroom? So define clear minimum standards for behaviour. We should be allowing our learners to develop social and personal skills through different groupings. We should be able to create opportunities to listen to all our students, develop a scaffolded approach to learning. We need to be aware of the specific needs of every learner in our class. We need to communicate clear timings and offer learners the opportunity to respond and reflect. We need to create a calm, purposeful learning environment, and obviously that's kind of linking in with our social and emotional classroom in the Liverpool way. Are we clearly displaying timetables and key information? Are we using pre-assessment to inform our planning? And that's kind of really important, how are we looking at their progress? Is that supporting our planning? We're not just kind of going over things they already know. Are we letting students choose how to show what they've learned? And we shouldn't compare the progress of one student with another. Okay, and we should be focusing obviously as our students as individuals and looking at their own personal progress. Okay, so we're now going to move on and have a little look at how do I demonstrate effective planning for teaching, learning and assessment. Okay, so it's obviously really important that we know our learners, and as well as having kind of our targets and our planning documents. A really good way to kind of get to know our learners and look at their progress is learner profiles. And this is something that the college are looking at, going back to, because we kind of do recognise the benefits of having these. So just there on the PowerPoint slide is an example of kind of what a learner profile would look like, and that will be used to then shape kind of your lessons and what, your rationale for why you're doing particular things based around the students that you have. So I just leave that up so you can have a little look at it, and I think we will be going back to that, and it's made me think that when it comes to planning, it would be easier if we did have these kinds of learner profiles that we could use. So I'll just leave that up so you can have a read. Okay, so this is just a little individual task now, and we went on training and we did this, and it's quite nice to reflect back on as well. So if you individually think of a learner that you've taught previously who had additional needs, I want you now to pause this and take a couple of minutes to write a learner profile for them. So you could kind of follow the template that's just been on the last slide. So you need to have a little think about, like, what was their baseline assessments, what did they indicate, what support was given, what progress did they make, and you can focus particularly on skills development. What impact has this had on the learner? What targets are they now working towards? So if you can think about a particular student who you previously worked with, and you can link that, and that's just having a go at writing, writing one of these in preparation for when we start to do that. Okay, so this is the final part of the recording, and this is about Ofsted and the 3 I's. And I'm aware that some of you will know what these are already, so I'm going to introduce them and then get you to think about, obviously, putting these and using them for our planning. Okay, so the 3 I's there are now displayed on the PowerPoint. So intent, implementation and impact. So intent is all about, like, what do you want the student to learn and why. Implementation is, how are we doing this? Is our delivery thorough? Are we doing it through pedagogy and assessment? And the impact is, how effective are we? What progress has our student made? And they are Ofsted's 3 big focuses for when they next come in and see us. So a little bit of time now to just self-reflect and have a little think about, what we've covered, and especially the 3 I's there that we've just touched on. So I'd suggest maybe thinking about your Ofsted 3 I's and looking at your plan and the course that you teach on already, and thinking about, how well are they planning for, your lessons, your schemes of work, are they thinking about those 3 I's? And as I said, just a little self-reflection point that you could think about. That's just what we've covered over the session. So if you have a student with additional needs in your class, how do you know this? Where would you find more information about their specific needs, and how would you address it? Are you able to list the 3 fundamentals of creating accessible resources? Can you name one thing you can do to develop an inclusive classroom? What key things should you consider in your planning for learners with additional needs? How can you demonstrate your rationale and relevance to the session for the learner? What are the current potential barriers that you've identified for your learners, and how are you going to address them? What are the 3 I's? And then I would have a little think about if you've got any further questions or recommendations for further training, and if you could send them to us in a Teams message, and I can feed that back to Michelle, and we can get that set up as well. And we can obviously talk about what's been covered in today's session when we meet face to face over the next couple of weeks. So thanks very much for listening and having a little go at the activities, and I hope you found that beneficial. I'm sorry I can't be with you in face to face for this session, but as I said, if anyone's got any questions or there's anything you need me to kind of clarify, please don't hesitate to send me a message on Teams, and I'll get back to you as soon as I'm back at work. Okay, thanks.